be talking about plastic pollution today in the Monterey Bay and alternatives that you can use at home or things that you can do at home to help with the plastic pollution problem. So sit tight and we'll get started in just a moment. Wait for some people to enter the live stream. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started. So what's the big deal? Ooh, I should introduce myself. Hi, I'm Pravina. I work here at Seacliff State Beach, and I'm sitting in the visitor center right now, which is open to the public. Not right now, but when we do open up, anyone's welcome to come in. So what is the big deal with plastic? Well, one of the big issues with plastic is that it is not biodegradable. So humans have created this object and this item that can't naturally degrade on this planet. So if this plastic enters our ecosystems like oceans or forests or mountains, they're not going to break down on their own. They can break down in itty bitty tiny pieces that are still plastic, but they will never break down into like organic components. So if you left a tissue or a napkin out in the environment just by accident, that will naturally break down because it's made out of pulp from trees, but plastic will not break down like that. So that's one big issue, is that it will never go away once it's entered our ocean or mountains or forest. The next big thing is that it's not really recyclable. So yes, it is good to recycle and by all means throw your plastic in the recycling bin, but recycling is not as good as it should be. So plastic can only be downcycled, which means if it actually does get recycled, it can only be recycled into something with a lesser quality. So a plastic water bottle, for example, if you recycle a plastic water bottle and that does end up getting recycled, then that plastic can only become like polyester or maybe plastic used in carpeting, which will in turn end up in landfills eventually. So plastic can never be completely recycled. It's not a closed loop. So that plastic bottle will never become a plastic bottle again. It will be recycled into something lesser, like clothing or nylon or polyester. And most of our plastic recycling isn't actually recycled. So just because it's been put into a recycling bin doesn't mean it's actually getting recycled. Only 9% of plastics ever created since the beginning of plastics has ever been recycled. 9%, which really isn't a lot. So that means it's usually going to landfill or being incinerated, or in the worst case scenario, it's ending up in a natural environment like our oceans. So recycling really isn't the answer. While you should still continue to recycle, it's not the best solution. So what happens when our plastic enters a natural ecosystem like our oceans? Well, one big issue is entanglement. So animals like whales or dolphins or even sea otters, you can see a little foot of a sea otter right here, they can come entangled in plastics like fishing net or anything with a ring shape. So if you remember, they're not as common anymore, but these plastic beverage rings, anything with like a ring shape like this where an animal can swim through and accidentally get stuck in is really, really dangerous for animals and harmful. So once they've become entangled and if they can't get out, they may not be able to feed as well, so they might end up starving in their entanglement. Or some animals like dolphins and sea turtles need oxygen or air to breathe. So if they have become entangled underneath the water, they may not be able to swim up for air, and so they drown. It also makes animals more vulnerable to predators because they're not able to swim away. So entanglement is a really big issue, and fishing, plastic from the fishing industry actually makes up a huge portion of plastics in our ocean. So that is something to keep in your mind on. The next big issue is ingestion. So animals that have maybe eaten plastic. Now, animals don't go out hunting for plastic specifically, but plastic, when it reaches the ocean, it can absorb smells and from the ocean that kind of smell like prey to some animals. So big birds like albatrosses, which are these huge, beautiful seabirds that can swim for miles and miles, they go out to sea to search for their food, which are usually squid, little fish, and sometimes they'll accidentally pick up plastic instead because it smells like prey that they would normally eat, so like fish or squid. Also, the colors may even be attractive to these animals. So, plastic is being mistaken for food. Or if you're a hungry sea turtle and you see a plastic bag kind of drifting through the water, it may look like a jellyfish to you. So a lot of these animals may be eating plastics and not even noticing or realizing it because they don't know what plastic is. And all of this plastic enters their stomachs, can sometimes get caught up in their throat and digestive system, but it eventually, if they eat enough of it, it can make them feel really full. And since they're not getting any nutrition from the food or from the plastic, and it can essentially starve them because they don't realize they're hungry and they need to eat more. So that's one way ingestion is really bad. Now, ingestion can also, in the ocean, can also affect us humans through a process known as bioaccumulation. So if we're eating fish or seafood like clams and mussels, we may be eating plastic as well. Really tiny little animals in our oceans known as plankton. They're super tiny. We can't even see them most of the time. They are at the beginning of the food chain of the ocean. So, sun comes down, phytoplankton, which are plankton that can photosynthesize. They're kind of like little plant plankton. They are the beginning of the food chain. So, sunlight comes to these phytoplankton, and then there's bigger plankton known as zooplankton, which are like little animal plankton. So, basically, baby crabs, baby fish, anything that's really super tiny and can't really swim on its own. So, they could just drift with the ocean currents, are known as plankton, and these zooplankton will eat the phytoplankton, but sometimes they might even mistake little bits of microplastic as food. So microplastics, kind of like the name sounds, are just super teeny tiny pieces of plastic. A lot of them we can't even see. This includes plastic comes from our clothing a lot of times. So if you wear anything made of nylon or polyester, that's plastic, and when you wear it, or wash it, it sheds these plastic fibers known as microplastic, and these can be a really big problem in our oceans. And also microplastics can come from larger pieces of plastic that are being tumbled around in the ocean. The sun is beating down on them, and they're kind of just like crackling and breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, and that is microplastic as well. So these microplastics are also super tiny. The plankton are really tiny, and the plankton might mistake these microplastics for food. And that can be the start of it entering our food chain. So I've drawn a diagram of bioaccumulation. So this is a really basic diagram just to get a basic understanding of what bioaccumulation is. So it's basically when the plastic kind of accumulates up the food chain. It's a bit difficult to see on the screen. Alright, so down here we have our little zooplankton, our little plankton. And as an example, I've said that this little plankton has eaten one piece of microplastic. Now, that's not going to probably affect us directly. But a sand crab may eat 10 of these plankton, and in turn, the sand crab is going to have 10 pieces of plastic in it. And then a small fish may come along and eat 5 sand crabs, and so that will have 50 pieces of plastic in it. And a larger fish may come along and eat 5 of these smaller fish, and which all have plastic in it, and they may have 250 pieces of plastic in it. So you can see how it's starting to accumulate up the food chain, and when it gets to animals that are a bit larger and at the top of the food chain, it's really going to accumulate a lot. So I've drawn all these blue lines and dots to represent individual pieces of plastic. Now, it's not super accurate when you get up to here, so there's going to be a lot more pieces of plastic in there that I couldn't even fit into my fish. So let's say this has 250 pieces of plastic, and this sea lion here has decided to eat 2 fish, each having 250 pieces of plastic. So now this sea lion has 500 pieces of plastic in it. That's a lot of plastic. Even though they are micro and super tiny pieces of plastic, that's a lot of plastic. And I've drawn the human here who's decided to eat 1 of these larger fish. So this human also has 250 pieces of plastic in it. But wait, you may be thinking, humans don't really eat the stomachs of these animals, so maybe we're not eating the plastic, right? Well, it's been found that some microplastics can actually travel through the tissue, so it might have entered, or plastics might have entered the tissue of the fish, which humans do eat, or even the chemicals that are in the plastics or can be absorbed into the fish's tissue, and that is what the humans are eating. So yeah, here you can have a closer look at this. So you can see that this plastic is accumulating up the food chain, and it hasn't really been long enough for us to really know the full effects of plastic on food chains or humans or other animals, but science is coming out and it's starting to not look great for some animals. So let's make it more specific to the Monterey Bay. And the Monterey Bay, you may be walking along the beach and you might notice that there really isn't a lot of plastic that's washing up on their shores. Not compared to other countries, maybe in like Southeast Asia where lots of plastic is washing up every day. You can find like huge bottles of shampoo bottles and like soda bottles there. But here we're not really seeing a lot of that. And that may be because currents are taking plastics in different direction. Also, there isn't a lot of dumping going on out here. But studies have found that there's actually a lot of microplastics in the bay, which, as you can have learned from this bioaccumulation diagram, that does have a big impact on animals. So, microplastics in the bay. We haven't seen larger pieces of plastic yet, but time will tell. So let's talk about some alternatives to plastic. Things that we can do at home even right now. So one big thing to do is I like to add another R to the reduce, reuse, recycle, and that is refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. And that's just refusing pieces of plastic. So maybe you go to get some takeout to eat at home, and you can just ask them, hey, I don't need that plastic fork or plastic spoon because I have reusable utensils at home that I can use instead of using these plastic ones. So that's just refusing plastic that you don't really need. Or even bringing your own bag to the grocery store and refusing a plastic bag there. Well, I guess here it's mostly paper bags, but yeah, refusing plastic. So you can do that when you're buying produce, like fresh produce, fruits, and vegetables. You're going to wash it when you get home anyways. You can just put it right into your bag and not into a little plastic produce bag. What else can we do? We can also refuse little disposable cups. So if you see one of these little cups, maybe just say, hey, I don't need that. I brought my own water bottle, and you can fill up your own water bottle instead of using these plastic cups. Because if you think about it, they're really only used for a few minutes, and that's the use of their whole life. So you've used this for a few minutes, and it's going to be on the planet for hundreds of years afterwards. Also, a big thing to avoid are coffee cups because they are lined with plastic. Like these are takeout coffee cups that I'm talking about. And you can bring your own reusable travel mug. You can also fill up your own, if you have like a stainless steel water bottle. I like to just put my tea in straight into here because it's stainless steel. Instead of putting it into a disposable coffee cup. So a great thing to avoid are single-use plastics, and these are plastics that may only get used once, like plastic forks, plastic spoons, plastic cups, and a lot of plastic packaging. So while you're spending these weeks at home, you can start to think about what kind of plastics you're using a lot of in your household, and you may see that in the form of plastic water bottles, and a reusable water bottle is a great alternative to plastic water bottles. You may also find that you're using a lot of plastic packaging for food, and maybe you don't want to cut out eating chips because who doesn't love chips? But maybe if you buy those individual packet of chips, you can instead buy larger bulk size bags of chips, and just make sure you don't eat the whole thing like me. Yeah, so it's really just shifting your mind about what you're buying and what are better alternatives to what you're already buying. So even buying pasta, you can find pasta in plastic packaging, but you can also find it in cardboard packaging. Now, cardboard isn't great, but it's a much better alternative to using or to buying the pasta in plastic packaging, because you can recycle that cardboard or use it for fire, or even compost it. So finding alternatives like that, buying in paper instead of plastic. Another great alternative would be not using plastic bags, like I said earlier. Bring your own reusable bag to the grocery store to put your food in. Or if you're getting takeout, maybe bring your own bag and let them know ahead of time that you don't need that plastic bag. You can just put it straight into your own bag. If you have any more alternatives or any other ideas, please leave a comment down below, and so that you can share with other people. And I hope everyone is staying home and staying safe and healthy. Seacliff is looking really great. It's really sunny out and nice, so if you get a chance, come take a walk along the beach, but make sure you're keeping that 6 foot of social distancing. Thank you guys, and have a good rest of your day.